Let us now view the map, which leads us to the fortunes of Scorpio. Scorpio, the scorpion, is the 8th sign of the astrological zodiac. November 21st. November 21st.
Hello, Marty. Welcome to Down at the Docks. Today we're going to have a discussion about your passions, and your musical influences, and your background in general.
Okay.
I do know that you've recently started a show with Sfara Radio.
I have.
Which is very exciting, which we'll get to later on.
All right.
But let's go right to young Marty and talk about your musical influences.
Go easy, please.
Okay, cool. So I know you love your hip hop, you love your rap.
I do.
You love your funk.
Yep.
I could probably name many other genres. But when did your real interest start diving into music? How old was you and what was going on in your life at the time?
Well, I guess the first music I remember would be other than like cartoon theme tunes and whatnot. Real bands was on a Sunday. The family would like take there'd always be a weekly trip, and we'd go all over the country, and every Sunday there was there'd be a soundtrack playing in a car.
Yeah.
So I guess my parents were really into Motown.
Okay, cool.
And I wouldn't say soundtracks. One particular soundtrack, which was the Grease soundtrack.
Okay, yeah.
So that's when I remember listening to music, consistently.
Got you.
So that probably went on for a couple of years, and then when I first got into music properly, I guess I would have been maybe 12 or 13. And the first band that I really got into was Blair.
Okay, cool. Good choice.
Yeah, and that's
Coffee and TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic.
And that's a band that kind of they were doing pretty much a broad spectrum of musical genres. Incredible songwriters, great lyricist, and that really propelled me to want to investigate other types of music. And so I always felt really I don't know if privileged is the word, but really certainly really happy that was the band that I got into, because that really ignited my interest in music in general.
That's brilliant. When I think of Grease, the soundtrack, I always think of karaoke. There was a period in my late teens where you would always hear Grease Lightning on a karaoke machine.
Like the Mega Mix.
The Mega Mix, that was it. Oh, it's so weird because Grease was not in my generation.
Well, purists like myself wouldn't like the Mega Mix. It was, it's just lazy if anything.
Yeah.
But the soundtrack itself, wonderful. It's endured decades and will probably be around for as long as humanity's around, if anything.
It would. There'll be a point where the Grease soundtrack is what's the word? Public.
When it goes into official library listing.
Yeah. Once a track's 100 years old, right? You know what I'm going at, don't you?
I do.
Like classical music.
Yep.
Public domain.
Public domain. Yeah.
There we go.
Agreed. It's kind of it's unofficially there already. But yes, again, I guess with my parents being really into Motown and with Grease, I was lucky to kind of have that, because that's very really soulful music, and that really kind of encapsulates your interest as well, or it did for me.
I got you. When I think of my father when I was younger, he would always have Beach Boys on. And he'd have it on a record.
Right.
And he used to let me use his records, but he would oversee me to make sure that I put on the turntable properly, and you know what I mean? I think we've all gone through a situation like that where we've used our parents' records, and they've had to teach us how to use a player properly, not to damage the goods. Yeah, I remember my grandparents showing me as well, actually.
Well, that's kind of like a rite of passage, if anything, because that's where, you know, like when we get into, you know, talking about hip hop, that's where hip hop came from, records. And yeah, you know, kind of that comes from not being able to touch your, you know, like the record player in the house and the records as a kid, and having a fascination, and like, you know, really wanting, you know, like it's because it looks interesting to a kid that doesn't even know anything about music.
It looks like this there's a contraption.
A contraption, like kind of so it's like some kind of spatial intergalactic contraption.
Yeah. It's like when you look at the old hardware compared to now, which is just phones.
Yeah.
Well, there's buttons and knobs and tone, bass, mids, all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, pretty much a lot of, you know, my generation and our generation you know, really got into music to a very, you know, serious depth. Probably would all have a similar story to tell.
It's really exciting. Have you seen those videos where they show children or teens now, like tape players or VHS players, and they just can't quite work out what they are? Have you seen those videos?
I think you've shown me a few.
Yeah, they're quite interesting. I think there's one when a child's got a tape player, cassette player, and she can't quite work out what it is. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that's probably from like the same range as you know, like you've got young adults and you know, listening to things for the first time, and like the reactions taped. And you know, it could be like a classic album from like the 90s. Yeah. That they weren't even born, and like the reactions filmed.
Got you.
So it's not too dissimilar.
I was recently watching a video where someone was reacting to Def Leppard's "Pour Some Sugar on Me" or "Hysteria."
Yeah.
Those classic 80 riffs, and the reaction, like, just made me so happy watching that. The first time someone's receiving those waves, you know.
Well, it always kind of it takes you back to how you thought when you first got into, or you first heard something which sounded so otherworldly in your universe at that time, which is what music's always done for me. It's always you know, introduced different ways of thinking and different, like, you know, it's more than just listening to songs. It opens you up to, you know, culture and art and a whole lot of, like, the whole spectrum of just, like, you know, of you know, creativity, I guess, if anything.
It's like a Pandora's box of excitement.
It is.
It can lead you down so many creative routes in your life.
And it has done for me, and, you know, I've got no doubt that it has done for you as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. But we can always go back to music. Keep rolling, rolling, rolling. Do you like Limp Bizkit?
Used to.
You don't anymore?
No. No one likes him anymore.
He looks too much like Ian, Fred Durst. Ian Nesbitt, you look like Fred Durst. What do you think, yeah?
I wouldn't want to incriminate myself on camera.
So that's...
No, sorry, no.
So that's a yeah. Right, so we got up to the part where we was talking about hardware, music hardware, which is quite nostalgic.
Yep.
And how music is rooted amongst various creative mediums like art, photography, poetry, which is not too common anymore, but I do love poetry. Me being a person from South Wales, Dylan Thomas.
Yeah, one of the world famous Dylan Thomas.
Yeah. Obviously, he's misconstrued as an Irish person sometimes in America. I remember a Family Guy episode actually, and Peter Griffin went to his Irish descendants. It was like a back in time sort of episode.
Right.
And he went to his great grandfather Dylan Thomas, who had an Irish accent, who lived in Ireland.
Right.
And I really didn't like that episode because they got the facts so wrong. Dylan Thomas, the Irish guy.
but that's like a common misconception in like America for sure, with like most accents.
I got asked if I was Irish when I was in New York in 2017.
How'd that make you feel?
Made me feel very proud to be Welsh, and I had to explain the situation. As us Welsh people always do, we like to make sure everyone knows we're Welsh.
But then you become like you have the opportunity to change people's perceptions, which is always it's like it's a real important opportunity to do that.
I think Wales has lost a lot of its identity over the years, but it's nice to know that we're still got our own flag on the international scale. I'll say one more thing before we go back into the crack topic. But do you know in Black Panther, the movie?
I do. Well, I know the movie.
You've seen it, yeah?
I have.
So the part where they're at the United Nations, they actually had Wales as an independent country at the United Nations in, I think it was like, Black Panther's like meant to be set in like 2026, something like that.
Yeah.
And they've actually predicted Wales's independence and included us at the United Nations in the movie as an independent country, which is awesome, I think.
It is, and like Black Panther is one of the most important films of recent times for obvious reasons, and but for many different reasons, and inclusivity is extremely important in general.
It is,
and to have that, you know, like if Black Panther was like, you know, in the stratosphere anyway, which it kind of is for like most people, then it shatters the stratosphere, if that's possible. So if anything could just go higher, it just has.
It is, and you know what's amazing? Unfortunately, what's the actor's name again?
It is Chadwick.
So he unfortunately died last year, was it, before the pandemic? But he's going to be playing Miles Davis in a movie coming out, yes.
Oh, wow.
I've studied a lot about Miles Davis when I was in college. Music was one of the degrees I took in college, actually. He had a major heroin addiction when he was younger. He pioneered fusion jazz. His father locked him in a barn and made him go teetotal. And he fed him under the door. So if you want to explore a wild trip, look into Miles Davis's life story sometime.
Yeah, cool. It's kind of that particular style of music at that time. Every pioneer, it's kind of like there's so much tragedy in all of the figureheads' lives, and so much like kind of like so much magic has come out of that music and that time frame. Which is kind of like feeds into true beauty comes from true pain. And when, you know, like when there's like stuff not exactly going right in your life, that's when you become extremely creative because you need to get it out. And that's definitely, that's a great argument for that.
Sometimes having a listening ear is not enough, even though that does help.
It helps.
You've got to get it out in other means possible sometimes.
You do. A listening ear can definitely, it can't be underestimated. But if there's other healthy avenues to kind of channel things that are inside you, then it should always be encouraged, and you should encourage yourself to do it.
Yeah. And don't become a Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
Don't go to the dark side.
Yeah, man, for sure.
That's a good metaphor. Okay, so we're coming into your teens now, if you go right back. So your 20s.
Right.
Was you in university at the time in your 20s, or college maybe? Or your late teens?
I wasn't, no. I left school and went straight into employment. And I guess so that was late 90s when it happened. So I, what I was listening to a lot at that point was the 90s alternative rock scene. A lot of inspirational artists. A lot of great characters. a lot of fantastic music, really like socially conscious music. So the stuff that I would have been listening to at that time would have been like stuff like Jane's Addiction.
Okay, yeah. Very alternative.
Very alternative, and you know, like the kind of the alternative, you know, like the grunge scene. Like I really love Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah.
Stuff like PJ Harvey.
Incubus.
Incubus. Well, yeah. Well, they came.
A little later.
A little later. They came like year 2001 for me. I think it was.
Okay.
But they were like a portal to like other stuff, because they were probably like I don't think I was always into hip hop music, but I never really you know, like I never explored that properly until like until the early 2000s, which was probably like it was the end of the golden age of that genre. So I was aware of like, you know, I was aware of great artists and pioneering hip hop artists and DJs from like the mid 70s, certainly through the 80s. But I didn't really properly explore it until, you know, a bit later on. So so yeah, like I got into Incubus, and there were a few different reasons why I really fell in love with them as a band. They were great, you know, great kind of like people. They cared about a lot of really important stuff. They wanted to raise awareness about really important stuff. They were like, in the band, there's 2 visual artists who draw and paint, and have since had, you know, exhibitions, and even gone to like art school. So I was kind of like, wow, this is a band that you know, exemplifies all of my interests at that time.
Yeah.
And they had a DJ in a band, and you know, kind of a lot of bands at that time had DJs in. Yeah. And it was kind of like there was a stigma about it, because of the whole kind of like Linkin Park, which you know, like I never really got into that much. But like, but you know, there was a lot of anger and angst in a lot of music at that time. But like maybe directed in a certain way, because it's good to have that in music, and it's essential to have that in music. But Incubus were kind of like, they were writing incredibly beautiful music. Yeah. And it was like spiritual, and it was extremely positive. But at the same time, you know, kind of writing about very melancholic subjects. Yeah. And subjects that you know, that were like, you know, again, extremely important, that we all need to hear about, and we all need to you know, we all need to stomach, and we all need to learn that we're not alone with. So like, you know, depression and you know, very kind of what probably at one point were considered negative you know, emotions, which we all have, which, you know, every emotion we can tap into at like any time. So we're all capable of feeling everything. But Incubus were kind of, they helped me out at that time, because they were extremely positive. They helped me with a positive outlook on life, and they were kind of a gateway to like really getting into hip hop from that point. Perfect.
So one thing I would mention there, since I brought up Linkin Park, was I don't know, I can't talk for Liverpool itself, because I've only been here for 4 years, but back home there was a people very much like to keep their taste in genre split. Yes. So when Linkin Park introduced, they had a rap member of the band, didn't they? They did. That really kicked off a lot, I think, because a lot of people didn't want to mix rock with rap, and it happens. I think Korn brought that sort of style in as well. Yeah. You know, they've got their sort of, I don't know how you would explain it, but they put a rap influence came into rock there, and I know a lot of people wanted to be very religious to their sort of tastes. Yeah, definitely, and I think Linkin Park were one of the bands to really do that, you know, well. I think they had an album, it could have been the first one, called Hybrid Theory. So that's what they were kind of wanting to, you know, introduce. But I completely agree.
I think for me as like a kid in school, I wasn't allowed to I wasn't allowed, but it wasn't the done thing necessarily to like a lot of different stuff. And I remember, just to go back to Blair just a bit, like in my school, like when I first got into music, Blair were like a pretty big deal in the country, and so were, Oasis. And in my school, it was a situation where you couldn't like both, and not many people like Blair. So I think that was probably the first time I felt, like an outcast is like a pretty strong word. But I was, but I wasn't exactly in with what was going on. Like as a even 12 or 13, something as unifying as music should be. Yeah. Because that's exactly what it should be, and it is. But yeah, the vision was definitely there, and I think like maybe when people could like they could stream tracks and they could extract tracks and they could put it onto different formats. So all of a sudden you had you could have like an iPod, and then you could have like 35 different tracks from 35 different artists from 35 different genres. Yeah. And that's kind of like that's where that first came in. And I think we're all thankful that it did.
Yeah. I think my first MP3 player was an iPod Shuffle, and it didn't really bother me that there was no way of navigating an album on it. It was you would load it up with 250 songs, and whatever came next. Right. Or whatever was in order when you loaded the tracks on. That never used to bother me because I used to really enjoy how the shuffle worked. There was no algorithm to it like they could probably do now, where software would match songs based on tempo and tone, I guess. But I just loved it where a random song will come up which you haven't heard in a while. Like that's what I used to like about the iPod Shuffles personally. Right. Plus they were much cheaper than the proper iPods at the time. Yeah. So yeah, when I was in school, it was quite taboo to mix your taste in musical genre because a lot of people used to dress to the stereotype as well. Yeah. Is that okay to say? Yeah.
Well, it's what was going on, so it's more than okay to say. It's
people used to dress to the stereotype. Green Day T-shirts, Offspring. In my case, a lot of Green Day T-shirts are Offspring. Down there, people used to get soap bars and soften them to do the spikes and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I hold my hand up and say I've done it before as well. I've had some interesting hairstyles over the years. Yeah, but yeah, I think that was it.
Well, it's expression.
Yeah,
but Wales, it's like it's fair to say it's always had like a rich history in music. Specifically, when you were would have been growing up, there was a lot of like indie bands that were making like a pretty big imprint, like on the UK charts.
Yeah, there was a good 10 years of it, I think.
Yeah.
We just blew everyone out,
Pretty much. Well, yeah.
We used to have a show called The Pop Factory,
right,
which came on after Top of the Pops. So it was like Wales' own version of like Top of the Pops. And they used to give unsigned bands a platform to go on television, which is quite good. I remember Muse was on there once before they were signed. Yeah. And I can remember looking at them going, who the hell are these? But their music's been really good over the years.
It has. I remember on Muse's first album, me and my brother, we like I think he really got into Muse, and like they played Liverpool, like year 2000 it must have been maybe. And Coldplay supported Muse. Like this would have been at the O2 now, O2 Academy. And yeah, so Coldplay, we got to see them on their first album. Yeah. In a very small setting, and and they were fine. Of course, one of the biggest bands, so of course they were fine. They knew exactly what they were doing. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, but kind of anything that kind of explains why there were so many incredible bands that came from Wales at that time, like proper bands as well. Proper bands that played.
Catatonia,
Stereophonics, Feeder,
Mannix.
Super Furry Animals, which one of the big, one of the massive ones.
Yeah, I never understood why they were so big myself growing up. But a lot of people do suggest Super Furry Animals over a few other Welsh bands.
Yeah, just like, you know, maybe a little bit offbeat, so they covered more musical ground.
Yeah. I've been listening to like some Welsh opera recently, toning into my roots.
Anything that you could recommend?
There's a song called Mafalwell, which was written in the 14th century, really old. And there's a cover Bryn Terfel has done. It's available on Spotify as well. Just to listen to it. A lot of people say it's the best love song ever written. We'll check it out after
Would you
this.
agree? Is it on the list? Is it on the top 10?
I thoroughly agree. I would say is. I mean, I would have to get some other suggestions, but even without, you don't even have to convert the language,
right?
Because it's actually in Welsh.
Okay.
It's backed up by a Welsh choir as well. The lead role is sung, and it's incredible. It's an incredible song. I would say it's the best love song ever.
Well, that's a statement.
But it's a hell of a statement because that song hasn't got. It's very if you know the song, you know your song sort of thing.
All right.
It's never been put in charts or anything. I mean, the song was written in the 14th century.
Well, a lot of the best music, it sounds like a cliche to say, but a lot of the best music isn't. A lot of the best music is the music that is not sold that much.
B-sides, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, back in the days where B-sides were written and a thing.
Have you ever bought, growing up, have you ever bought a CD and there's like a B-side which comes on after the first tracks in it, and you've gone, all right, let's check out this song. It's not on the album, it's B-side. And you're like, wow. And you're like, what's going on here? Like, but obviously they can only fit so many songs on, can't they? Is that how it works? You tell me.
Yeah, well, it is how it works, I would say. And it just proves that there was so much amazing music being written at that time, where you could get like CD singles and maybe there'd be like 4 tracks on it. And 3 of those tracks would be B-sides, original songs written during the recording sessions of an album.
Yeah.
And so you could have like 25 minutes of incredible music for like
the price of one.
For the price of one, for like whatever at that time, $3.99 or something.
What was your first cassette you purchased yourself?
Well, thankfully.
And where did you purchase it?
Well, thankfully you said that I purchased myself. Could have gotten quite embarrassing. But I think what I purchased myself back in like the first ever, like album or single, or it doesn't really matter.
Let's say single.
Single.
Yeah, let's say single.
I was, I guess, a marketing man's dream back in those days. So I was like really into the Tales, Teenage Mutant Ninja Tales, and I got T-U-R-T-L-E Power.
Okay.
By Partners in Crime from the first movie, and I got that on cassette. It may not have been the first, but it was definitely it was one of the first.
Mine would be. This is at the point where controversial songs were making their way into the UK charts. Right. Remember that? When was that? That was in the 90s, when we were getting oddball slipping in, weren't we?
Yeah.
So I bought Why Don't You Get a Job by The Offspring.
Oh yeah.
That was my first single cassette. I bought that in my local town. That
was from the album Americana. That was actually one of the first albums that I bought myself on CD.
Ooh, CDs.
From those times.
CDs still exist, which is quite cool. A lot of bands still sell them, unfortunately. It's nice to have, purchase a real thing.
Yeah, I guess it's the same as...
well, they do limited rolls of records now.
Yeah.
Limited set only, like 100 only.
Yeah. It's nice not to erase stuff. Like CDs, if you look after them, will last you for your whole life, pretty much. In fact, there's like a Prince album from the 80s that says exactly that on the CD. So that's, like cassettes are of a certain quality,
Yeah.
and bands now kind of almost like a what you would call it. What would you call it? It's like a gimmick where kind of like bands do now have like cassettes, but like the quality is terrible. But they'll just like have 100, and like it's not going to last forever.
No.
But CDs, there's much more of a chance, and records, which have many uses. Certainly when you're playing records as a DJ, or when you kind of like when you're playing records at home or anywhere that you play them, it's kind of like you're making a commitment. So you're able to so you have to go over and flip it over. So you're dedicating a bit of time and thinking, well, it's going to take like a bit of effort to go and do that, more so than just swiping on your phone.
Exactly. I follow Jamie Cullum myself. I've been a fan for years, and I follow a lot of his unpublished music. I know a lot of people, when they think Jamie Cullum, they think of some of the songs he's put in the charts, but some of the songs he's been writing away from the media that he just puts online every now and then, they're just amazing. But he released an album just before the first lockdown, and he released the album in cassette and LP as well, which I thought was quite good. CDs were available, but he did a limited edition batch of records and cassettes, which I thought was really cool. The cassettes are definitely coming around. I think. I see people every now and then with a cassette player or a boombox, which has that compatibility put back in. So maybe a few years from now, we might see it do a full 180.
Probably. I'm very fortunate. I got like a record player, probably about like 9 years ago, from Klaus Olsen.
Okay.
And I think I got it for like about $69.99 at the time, and that has like a CD player, a cassette player or deck, and like a turntable all in one.
Can you hit record and then play a record?
I've not tried it.
Does it have a radio built in as well?
It does have a radio built in, yeah.
So can you put the radio on and press record on the cassette?
You're not meant to do that, are you?
That's right, Gareth. When I was a kid, my grandparents had a similar setup with a record player, 2 cassette decks and a mini amp. And my cousin used to put like the charts on a Sunday. Yeah. And she just used to hit record.
Well, now you've incriminated your family first.
I haven't spoke to her in years.
Yeah, our family did that as well, or I did that as well. Yeah.
I think it was very common. You know, another thing which you could do if you had 2 VHS players in the house and you rent a movie from Blockbusters. Right. If you put the cassette in, put the SCART in the input on the next one, then output, press play and record on a blank. You can watch the movie while duplicating the... Right. If you had 2 VHS players.
Well, when all this stuff comes back in, because VHS players probably are going to come back in, again in like about 5 or so years' time. Yeah. You're just like giving everybody every incriminating idea they could ever have.
They'll probably come with... Because if you purchase a song or a movie... You're essentially buying a personal license to consume it as many times as you want. Yeah. The same with computer games too. But consoles like obviously release like the PS4 or the 5, and they don't. They've allowed that cross compatibility sort of, but in some cases they don't, which end up with people repurchasing the game. But just buying it once is a personal license, which you should never need to purchase that song ever again. Right. That's the theory behind it, but the companies kind of they put in these blockades sometimes, so that doesn't happen. Obviously, with music, it's a lot easier to keep hold of music. With games, it's different. Software, I guess. But yeah, I like my games. I kind of
You do love your
over,
games.
yeah.
You do love your games.
I love playing games. I've found a lot of inspiration from games, and I've also found a lot of amazing soundtracks from games as well.
Yeah, definitely. Soundtracks for sure. I personally am hopeless at any computer game I've ever, kind of tried to get into. But like graphics-wise, visually, always incredibly impressed, and definitely, as you say, soundtracks for sure.
So now we're talking about soundtracks. Let's talk about movies, which have great soundtracks.
Yes.
You tell me about some movies that have some great soundtracks.
Well, I guess stuff that I would say that would be the case with. I like Enter the Dragon, the Bruce Lee like Hollywood breakthrough film, and sadly his last film. Certainly his last big film. Incredible soundtrack by Lalo Schifrin, who did a lot of soundtrack work around that time.
Okay.
Like around the 70s.
Was his music, did he compose for other movies as well as Enter the Dragon?
He did compose for other films. Like I'm pretty sure, you could fact check me on this and I'd be incorrect, but I think he may have done Bullet, the Steve McQueen film, as well.
Okay.
But he was one of a number of great composers at that time. Henry Mancini, who did like the Pink Panther films, soundtrack them, and Philip Bond. No, Philip Bond couldn't have done the Bond films. That's ludicrous.
No.
But whoever did the Bond films, around that time, who again, Henry Mancini may have done a few of them as well, like a few of the Bond films. I think maybe he did.
What's your favourite Bond movie?
I would say, and this is definitely nothing to do with the soundtrack, but it's based on what it is.
Okay.
The one with Roger Moore in, Live and Let Die, set in New Orleans.
Yeah.
But that's got nothing to do with the soundtrack.
They got street festivals and everything in
that. Yeah, exactly.
You get a taste for the culture in that movie.
You do.
Don't you?
You do, and I think that's what they always try to aim for. But they nailed it with that.
And voodoo is still a common. What do you call it? A religion? Yeah. Voodoo, black magic is still very well known in the Mississippi as well. Yeah. Very interesting, isn't it, to know that voodoo is still a common religion in that part of the States. Yeah,
it is. I think like with every religions that have been around for all time, they're just never going to go away. But it's an interesting insight, and probably James Bond films are what they are, aren't they? But that's definitely one of the more intriguing ideas that they had. My father loves a James Bond movie, and he's always talking about the next one. Does Daniel Craig have one more to go? Apparently, he has done the one which has been forever delayed because of the times that we're in, but that'll be his last one. But your dad must be freaking out because for the past 2 years, it's all been about who's going to be the next guy to play him. Every time I catch up with my father, we always have the same conversation. Does he have a favourite or a preferred candidate? I think Daniel Craig is probably his favourite. I don't know why. I think he might relate to him in some way, which my dad's quite brutish. I think Daniel Craig is probably the brutish out of all the James Bonds. I think he's very grounded, and maybe it's the way it's been directed, but he's very gritty, unlike some of
previous James Bonds.
He's the closest to the source material.
Is it?
Because James Bond is a flawed character.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's as close to the source material as has gotten to date.
It's quite interesting to know. So James Bond probably smells more like a farmer than someone with Paco Rabanne on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bit of BO thrown in as well. But he is though, and he's
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite cool. It's when you see what's that show on Amazon, Knives Out? He really looks much older than what you think in that, I think.
Well, how old is he now? Like 50s?
Who knows?
Who knows?
How old is Tom Cruise? He's 59, isn't he?
He must be. He must be by now.
1 year off 60, Tom Cruise, and he's still kicking ass like a 25-year-old spring chicken.
Doing his own stunts.
Yeah, this is amazing.
But that's maybe that. That's he's got his own religion.
Should we go down there? My girlfriend watches a lot of documentaries on Scientology. We've passed the Scientology church in New York when we went as well. It's like, whoa, this thing actually is real, isn't it? When you see that, an actual church with Scientology.
Yeah, and like they say, Tom Cruise is like very, very high up in the chain.
He's put a lot of money into it.
Yeah, like heaps of cash, and there's all kinds of hellacious Hollywood stories about when people have tried to leave, and he's been
Hotel California.
Yeah, yeah, he's been very persuasive.
He is, yeah. So let's go back on track. So we're in our 20s now.
Yeah.
Where should we go? What was your social life like back then, and your social life where music kind of mixed? What was you up to? Where was you to at the age of like 25? Was you in Liverpool or?
At the age of 25, I was in Liverpool at the age of 25, I think. But I went like my mum. She moved to a Canary Island.
Oh wow!
When I was 22 or 23.
Are there canaries there? That's the question.
It is the question, and it's a common question. And you'd have to ask her.
Yeah.
Yeah, she could have her own show.
Canary Islands are just off the coast of Spain, right?
Yeah. So I think I was about 22 when she moved over there. So I found myself in a position to be able to move over there myself. When I think probably when I was just nearly 26.
Okay, yeah.
And so I ended up living over there for like about a year. I was initially working in like a karaoke bar run by a lovely woman named Cindy Goodwin, I believe her name was.
Goodwin.
A great character, and she'd been on the island for like about 15 years. She was a massive like Lionel Richie fan, and she had a place. She had a bar called Rocky's, and they had like a karaoke night like 3 times a week.
Okay.
And my mum ended up working there first because her partner used to run the karaoke night there.
Okay.
And so I was living there for a bit, looking for stuff to do. After a while, I ended up working at that bar, paid just in tips, and so I did that for about 8 weeks, and then I ended up working as part of an entertainment team, which is a thing over there.
Okay.
For this hotel.
Okay.
So we kind of our job was to entertain the guests, do games with the guests in the daytime, and we would like perform a show for the guests once a week.
Okay.
So I was listening to like all kinds of different music there. So one of a guy who became a dear friend out there, his name is Yanko.
Okay.
And he was like really into he was into street dance. So that was the first time that I'd ever seen, or the first time I'd ever known anyone who I could call a friend who was doing that type of stuff. So he showed me a few moves there, and yeah, so we kind of so we were put on a show for the guests. So I was kind of like, you know, listening to all kinds of stuff at that point. A lot of like old show tunes.
I had no idea you lived on the Canary Islands.
I know this is it's a dark secret that I keep.
You've surprised
you know, as
me.
soon as you flash the lights on me, it all comes out.
That's amazing.
I'm singing like a canary.
I didn't realise how cultured you was, mate.
Yeah, so at that point it was like, you know, sort of listening to a lot of stuff that I wouldn't usually listen to. One of you know, like the show that we performed for the guests was like a sketch show with a whole lot of different stuff in there. So so one of the routines that we had to learn was like a ballet routine.
Okay.
Which is something that I never would have had the opportunity to kind of, you know, to do, even to like a very, very small amount.
Yeah.
Like as much of a snippet as it gets, but I was still able to kind of like, you know, to have an introduction to it and then go out and perform it to these guests. So it was like, you know, listening to some ballet music at that time, like old, like, you know, 70s show tunes, like cabaret stuff at that point. And you know, and also, of course, as you'd imagine, homegrown music, you know, Canarian artists, you know, like Canarian hip hop.
I didn't even think that.
Yeah. There was
a good music scene there, yeah.
Yeah, you know, like like because of the nature of the island, I guess, it was all like live. It was all about live entertainment. So they had like a lot of really great live music. Again, like stuff that I would not have been able to, I wouldn't otherwise have had any exposure to. So like the year that I was there, I did like loads really, because initially there was all of like, you know, like at the karaoke bar Rockies, like a lot of like Scandinavian guests would go there, a lot of English guests, like, you know, a couple of like, you know, Italian guests. So there was like a nice mix.
Yeah, what would be the island's sort of like core genre? Was it Spanish influence? Was it like flamenco going on? Or?
As far as like homegrown stuff, I would say it was flamenco, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, it was.
I know a few flamenco tunes on classical guitar.
Yeah, well, at the like the resort that I was working at, it was called Amphi Del Mar.
Okay.
And they had like 4 or 5 different hotels on the island, and like 3 of those 5 hotels were all like in the one complex, and so they had like loads of bars there. They had like you know, like shops, you know, different like leisure facilities. So on any given night, you could wander by, and you would be seeing like, you know, flamenco guitar players. In the restaurants and like whatnot.
Lovely. I love flamenco.
Yeah, very beautiful type of music, and very like, you know, like very maybe like dramatic's not the word, but it's like it's a real performance. It's
driven. Like, there's a driving flamenco, which is cool.
Yeah, and also they had like, you know, sort of I guess like the clubs that they had there were very influenced by like by the American hip hop scene, I guess, really. So I got an insight into that as well. And then when it came back, I was able to actually take, you know, kind of breakdancing courses, or, you know, classes, I should say.
Oh yeah, you was doing breakdance.
Yeah. Not very good at it.
You're quite a tall guy, so
yeah, very tall guy.
I can imagine you doing a few sweeping kicks, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sweep about 10 guys out in once. You probably could, like.
Yeah, I'd like to say that was the only reason that people weren't standing around me, but it was also my ability.
I can imagine a spinning top like 10 meters long, like going around on the floor.
Yeah, that's it. And I'd like to say that that's the reason why I never did anything like that. But again, it was
because he was dangerous.
My lack of ability. But I was able to kind of kind of come home and at that point there was an incredible like breakdance scene here. There was you know, there was like a group of dancers, and like they'd go out on like a Saturday afternoon into town, and they would like busk and do like a routine. Yeah. And again, I wasn't up to that level, and never would be if I you know, tried to break dance every day for the rest of my life. But kind of, but to know those guys and just to know that was going on in a city was it was great.
What I've noticed quite popular now is dancing on roller skates. If like I've been down by the pier head a few times,
Yeah.
and there's a few people down there with boom boxes on the floor, and they're like doing routines on skates.
Yeah.
I find it really cool.
Well, that's like the next level.
Skating's gone around because Liverpool's quite. I wouldn't say it's well known for it, but Liverpool's got a roller derby team.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And there's you've got that subculture then of people who dance on skates who really enjoy that sort of sport. I've noticed a lot of people practicing down there.
And also, this is a great location to practice any dance, I guess, really, or any skating.
It's so smooth down there, and there's well done to Liverpool Council for not putting signs up deterring people. They actually, I wouldn't say they encourage it, but they allow it to happen down there, which is quite cool, I think. I can imagine other cities not being as lenient. Liverpool's always been quite lenient with the people who live here, I think.
Yeah, I guess encouragement is one thing, allowing is another thing, as you say.
Yeah, if you're not causing any bother, it's a skill as well.
It is a skill,
and you need places to do it.
Yeah, well, like anyone that can skateboard, that's a real skill. And for years you've seen skateboarders, up and down the docks.
Yeah,
it takes incredible talent and persistence and dedication.
Oh, it is.
And concentration to properly do that.
It is. In another life, I've always imagined myself not being a pro skater, but being able to use a skateboard well enough to get around.
Well, the great thing is we can have as many life, as corny as this will sound, we can have as many lifetimes as we want in the lifetime that we live. So the only thing that prevents us from doing something like that is ourselves.
I guess.
So there's always a new start, there's always a new beginning. Until we get to the end.
You can add a new dimension on to our life. I mean, because I bought that electric scooter recently.
Of course, yeah.
I thought that I was going to have issues, and I just took to it like a duck on water.
Well, for sure, because I've just been privy to seeing you scootering around on it, and that's it. And that's exactly it. You are a natural.
One day I might fall off, my confidence might be gone to zero. I used to love rollerblades. I used to have blades when I was a kid, but when I fell off there one time, it's a bit scary trying to go back on them sometimes.
Well, I guess, like many things, confidence is fluid. So as soon as you think you've got it all figured out, that's when, that's when you fall flat on your face. So that's a constant roller coaster of of being able to do stuff and then telling yourself you can do stuff and then thinking, oh man, I can't do stuff, I can't do this stuff. So.
I should really get a helmet though. So if that does happen, my confidence won't be as knocked as much as it would without the correct safety gear on, I guess.
Well, acknowledging that probably at some point your confidence it will be knocked is a great step in the right direction anyway, or a great scootering in the right path.
Scooting in the right path. Right, so let's go to your 30s now. Let's just do a bit of a leap.
Yeah.
Still in Liverpool?
Still in Liverpool.
What's the scene like in your 30s?
Yeah, kind of a bit more, a bit more relaxed, a bit more, hopefully, a bit more willing to kind of check other stuff out and not think that's not for me. What business do I have checking out this?
Yeah.
So definitely, I think in my 30s, I've consciously made an effort to check out more new music, more new artists. That's definitely come from the DJing, which didn't start until my 30s. And discovering that, discovering that the discoverment of music is so contagious. It's so, contagious and kind of magical. And for me, probably that's when I realised I'm not like a rock fan, I'm not like a hip hop fan, I'm not like a dance fan, I'm a music fan.
You're not part of anything specific.
Yeah, I'd like to think not these days. You know, like I get extremely excited by like a lot of different stuff. So, you know, music across the spectrum.
I've noticed you're very delightful when for anyone to show you new music as well.
I am.
I've showed
you showed me some great
tunes.
stuff.
Yeah. So.
Well, yeah, and you know, kind of at one point I would have been. I hope I wouldn't have been dismissive, but wouldn't have been, you know, kind of like keen to kind of check out everything that, you know, I can check out these days. So I'm glad that that's kind of happened. But you've shown me some like, you know, great stuff, and you know, like the incredible people in my life that are into incredible music show me stuff every day. So like a lot of like the kind of, you know, like a lot of the consistent artists that have consistently been into in my 30s has been stuff like Odd Future, who kind of who were and still are, you know, in terms of their legacy. Sadly, they're not together as a collective anymore. Yeah. But in terms of their legacy, they're as important as anything has ever been, in terms of, you know, kind of artists that are completely themselves and they encourage you to be yourself. And there's all kinds of different, you know, kind of lifestyle choices and you know, lifestyle, you know, people's lifestyles that aren't, you know, choices. They are extremely well represented by that group. And like Frank Ocean, you know, kind of came from Odd Future, or, you know, he was around writing songs for other artists before he joined that collective, but that's where he came to, you know, global prominence. And Frank Ocean's been one of the best artists for me of the past decade. Tyler, the Creator, you know, Sid, from like, you know, the internet. So there's been like so many different offshoots. So Odd Future have been massively important. Billie Eilish has been massively important.
I've noticed you share a lot of Billie Eilish.
I do share a lot. Well, she's such a you know, again, she's such an important artist for everybody. A great role model for like, you know, young women and old, you know, older women. You know, a great model for young men, boys, old men. She's a great role model for everybody.
Yeah, she's a good advocate for putting people on the right path, I guess, and she's a good advocate for the ever-changing world around us.
Well, she's you know, she's like 19 years of age now, been in the public eye, glaring gaze of the public eye, you know, for like 3 or so years now. She's an incredible musician, which you need to have that anyway. But her kind of her approach to fame, you know, and having this incredible gaze upon her, which I'm sure it's been difficult for her. And she actually brought out a documentary recently, which I'm sure is going to explore that, which I am yet to see, and I'm sure it's been incredibly difficult at times. But she's somebody that seemingly is able to just adapt to this, you know, unbelievable weight of fame, you know, that is, you know, on her. She's got a great fashion sense, which is entirely uniquely her own, and she's just somebody that is exactly what is needed. It's needed right now in, you know, today's world, and it's been needed, you know, forever. It's kind of like rewriting the rule book on what a mainstream, you know, mainstream, which she's not really.
Do you think she wouldn't have been given a platform if someone like her was emerging 10 to 15 years ago?
It probably would have been more difficult.
Because I guess, like, there's a lot of spoon-fed stuff out there, and for someone like herself to grow her own platform like that, to become super famous like that, I can imagine 10 to 15 years ago, people like that being shot down before they even start. Do you know what I'm getting at?
I do, and I reckon you're right. Like definitely about like 20 years ago, where like what was like mainstream pop was a whole different thing, and it was extremely manufactured, and all those acts, you know, nothing against those acts, they brought a lot of joy to you know, kids and like things.
Yeah. Gareth Gates.
Gareth Gates, yeah.
Will Young,
Will Young.
I actually do like Will Young. I think he's really good.
Well,
and he still creates great songs.
Yeah, well, Will Young, he had like more control over what he was doing.
He didn't
Great
win.
vocalist.
He didn't win though, did he?
I don't think he did, no.
It was Gareth Gates who won.
It was. Yeah, so like, you know, and what was going on in like America with like, you know, the Backstreet Boys and those acts, it was like a whole different thing. So I don't think someone like, you know, Billie Eilish probably would have been as
prominent.
You know, yeah, exactly. It's all about, you know, just, you know, what, you know, it's like maybe she's a product of the ever-changing world that we live in, or a more aware world, because like, you know, the different lifestyles that are out there, they've always been around, but there's just more exposure, and, you know, thankfully there is.
Yeah,
these days.
I think the way social media works, it allows us to choose who is a celebrity.
Yeah.
Based on obviously the artist's hard work being thrown out. I mean, you could, you know, the Kardashians, you can argue the point where they're amazing business family,
Yeah,
and
I'd
then
say so,
you can, but you see emerging artists being, if you put something good online and people like it, you can grow so quick. I think.
Yeah. Well,
You know.
artists themselves are in more control of their image and you know, what they want to portray, which is definitely a major positive.
If you think of Michael Jackson as well, his persona later on in life was probably curated more by lawyers and people in people with legal powers, I guess. You know, I don't know. Did we? I mean, Michael Jackson is. I mean, some people don't like him because of, you know. I don't know my own opinion of Michael Jackson, but based on the amount of stuff and evidence put out, then obviously not. Maybe he wasn't the person that we all thought, but Michael Jackson did have a persona which was kept for a long time, and you've got to. I always think if it was himself or not, you know what I mean. People like to encapsulate that part of the artist.
Yeah, and
he was on a lot of drugs as well. He
Yeah.
might not even know what he was up to. Yeah.
Well, and as like, you know, like when he was famous, there was probably a lot more of that, you know, kind of like of a record label really, you know, like controlling what the public thinks of an artist. Whereas with like social media, and artists having more platform, you know, having, you know, like a bigger, more personal platform, then that's changed the game in that sense, where, you know, we as consumers, we are able to kind of, you know, check things out ourselves. There's more, it just the whole thing, you know, it just feels more real.
Yeah. I guess social media allows celebrities to mess up as well. You know what I mean? Say things inappropriate online. Yeah. And kind of screw their own careers up.
Yeah.
Who was the lead singer of Wham? George
Michael.
George Michael. So I think he was kind of encapsulated a lot until his later years when people started realizing what George Michael was really like. They tried relaunching his career, didn't they? Based on Britain's Got Talent or Pop Idol. Remember when they launched an album on that? Right. And I was like, oh. I think George Michael was brilliant though. His songs were incredible.
Great, great artist, great singer.
Did he have #1 for Christmas 2021? and it was like, it was last Christmas, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I thought it was the first time hitting a number one, wasn't it? I think that's what the case was. But
Yeah, I recall.
I thought that would
hearing
have been
yeah.
number one multiple years.
Yeah. But like Mariah Carey, I think the same thing was with her, because because she's got one of the biggest, most successful Christmas songs of all time. But I don't think it ever hit the top spot, or maybe not until recently.
Remember when they had to change the way the music charts worked because of online downloads, and what's that? Oh, what's his name? Bald guy plays drums.
Phil Collins.
Yeah. So it allowed the songs to get screwed up then, didn't it?
Right.
You know what I mean? So Phil Collins got up there once as well for Christmas.
Yeah. That's it.
That was like the year the internet decided to control the charts.
Yeah, that's right. When it's not just like physical sales, and it's not about what's out there, and then it's downloads and the massive wealth of music which is all over the internet. When you include that,
didn't Machine Head get number one as well? Was it Machine Head?
Like Rage Against the Machine.
Rage Against the Machine. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, they got number one.
But Machine Head, they had some pretty okay songs.
Yeah.
So that would have been a good shake-up if they did get to number one.
Awesome. So, we've gone over an hour now, yeah? So we should jump to now.
Yeah.
And I think we should bring you back on as a guest later on.
Yeah, that's great,
right,
man.
Cool. So
that's
I'll
great.
just say that now. So tell me what's going on now in your life. Obviously, we've covered so much ground. I feel it would be appropriate to bring you back as a guest later on. But tell us what's going on in your life at the moment.
So what's going on now, you alluded to at the top of the hour, which was I'm in this very beautiful building, the Edward Pavilion.
Yeah.
I've very recently, within the past week, started my own radio show. And you yourself, with your incredible graphic skills, have helped me out.
It was okay.
So I did the first episode last week. It's called Inside the Belly of the Beats. So that's kind of like and of course that was an opportunity that I was coming down to see you to drop off some artwork because I love to draw as well.
Yeah.
So I was dropping down some artwork to you, and one of your colleagues in this building. We got talking. Yeah. He said, "You said, oh well, Marty's a DJ," and boom, yeah, it happened. And he was able to kind of. So there's a radio station in this building called Svara Radio. I was introduced to the guys. My new very good friend Josh. I had a meeting with him. We talked about music and about why I would want to do a show. And then the next week I was doing it, and then 2 days later it was on. So yeah, now thank you. So now, very gratefully, I'm in this building once a month doing a radio show.
That was incredible. That's just, I don't know.
It's opportunity.
The opportunities arrive when you put yourself out there.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I think that's exactly what happened that day. You put yourself out to drop some artwork off, and the positive vibes just flowed.
Positivity, enables other positivity. So we were having a good afternoon. It was the first time I'd seen you in months.
It was.
Because of obviously the situation that we're all in. I dropped down the artwork. We had a brief catch up, and then next thing that's happening. So, yeah, it's
amazing. So
very exciting.
That was your first show, which was aired on Easter Sunday.
Easter Sunday, it was indeed. Yeah, 3 o'clock. Yeah. So I think I am going to be doing a monthly show. It's going to be, as far as I know it right now, it's going to be a Saturday, 3 till 5, once a month. It may be the first Saturday of every month. I'm not too sure if that's the case yet. But I'll be posting about all that on Instagram, because that's where we all post things these days. And of course, Svara Radio themselves are on they're on Instagram, and also they have their own website. You can listen to the station on their website, or there's a free downloadable app.
Brilliant. I downloaded the app myself.
Yeah. And you know a good app when you see one.
Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah.
I was impressed. So all the information that we've discussed today will be available in the description section on this video. But that was a hell of an hour. That flown by.
It was, yeah.
I want to say thanks to Marty for coming in today. It's been amazing to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Bringing the vibes in as well.
It's always it's always great to speak with you. Great stuff always happens whenever we speak, even if it's just having a great time ourselves. So
you always got to have a good time.
When I heard about this, I was happy to. I was privileged for you to invite me on.
Yeah, and so early in the show as well. Yeah, we had Amy Collins on just the other day.
We did.
Who you know very well.
I do know Amy very well. My housemate. She was very excited. Of course, I don't want to speak for Amy, but she was really excited to kind of come on. And I heard it went incredibly well.
It did, and she was so hyped.
Which, when you consider the components, yourself and Amy, having a great conversation, how could it not go well?
It was the first one too, so it was more structured than this. Let us know in the comments if you prefer more like an open discussion videos like this, or if you have seen the interview with Amy, if you prefer questions fired. But it would be interesting for people to let us know in the comments if they prefer an open discussion, or just asking questions might feel a bit more like you're in the hot seat. I think chatting like this might be better. But anyway, I think we are going to ask Amy back on in a couple of weeks as well, because her life is ever changing. She's preparing for the lockdown to ease.
She is.
So she's got a lot of work on her plate at the minute as well. So it'd be cool to do a catch up later in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And Amy, obviously, always incredibly warm and engaging company, and such an inspiration to many, myself included.
Yeah, and myself. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks to Marty.
Thank you for having me.
All the information, like I said, descriptions. Peace out.
Let us now view the map, which leads us to the fortunes of Scorpio. Scorpio, the scorpion, is the 8th sign of the astrological zodiac. November 21st. November 21st. Scorpio.